What is up, space pirates? This is your Admiral, the Dread Pirate Dr. Disaster, and I am a professional noticer of things. I notice, for example, that when a game comes out that gamers have rejected because it leaned into the culture war and went woke, when the developers of those games talk about how their games have done, they always bring up the number of players rather than the number of units sold, and when gamers question this, the game journalists swoop in and arrogantly say,
"Keep your mouth shut about stuff you don't understand."
No, I don't think I will.
Let's run through some of the games that have done this. Dragon Age the Veilguard was one of the titles that started this trend, announcing that they hit 1.5 million players after a few months. Or, here's an article bragging about Avowed hitting 5.9 million players. There's that word again. And then, of course, Assassin's Creed Shadows famously bragged about hitting 3 million players in the game's first week, but all of those games, as we learned later on, ended up being flops. And all of these games used player data instead of sales figures to pretend that they weren't flops.
If I fake it, then I don't have it.
The reason this data is misleading to use is because it includes people who play the game on a subscription service like Game Pass. It includes people who buy the game on Steam and then refund it because it was bad. It includes people who buy the physical copy of a game, play it on their PlayStation profile, and then they lend it to someone else who plays it under their profile. That would count as 2 players. Meanwhile, the industry standard for whether a game has been a success or not is the number of units sold. So, whenever I hear one of these weenies try to use this other metric, I go,
That was really good. Now gently remove your tampon and try again.
But as a professional noticer of things, I have also noticed that, without fail, when a game comes out that gamers love and which is undeniably successful, they always make announcements using the units sold metric. Monster Hunter Wilds is a prime example. They announced that they sold 10 million units in a month. Space Marine 2 just announced that they sold 7 million units in less than a year. Or, here's the news of the day, Stellar Blade just announced that they sold 1 million units on PC after only 3 days. Not bad for a game that is already over a year old. The game journalists are crying about Stellar Blade selling well because it doesn't fit their narrative. After all, this is a game for straight males which came out in June, the holiest of months for game journalists and current thing enthusiasts. But Stellar Blade rolled up its sleeves and said,
"If it's a whoopin' you're a wantin'."
Alright, me hearties, make sure that you hit the like button on this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and don't forget to follow me over on Rumble, where I started uploading some content as well. Also, please consider supporting the channel by becoming a member. I'm working on a space pirate cartoon, which channel members will have first access to. We can't just complain about the state of our culture, we have to create alternatives. So, if you want to support that sort of thing, consider a channel membership for as little as $5 per month. But alrighty, let's talk about the Stellar Blade sales announcements. First of all, we're going to read this article really quick here from WCCF Tech, where they tell us how well the game has sold. Keep in mind, this has no mention of player count at all. This is totally the statistic for units sold. Anyhow, it says here, today, South Korean game developer ShiftUp announced that Stellar Blade has surpassed 3 million units globally across all platforms. Of these 3 million, 1 million units were sold on PC in just 3 days on the market. The studio also remarked on the record we mentioned in our previous report, Stellar Blade is now the Sony-published single-player game with the highest concurrent user peak on Steam, as well as the strong praise from Steam users who have left 15.6 thousand reviews, of which 94% are positive. So, after a year, Stellar Blade hit roughly 2 million in sales when it was a PS5 exclusive, and in 3 days they have hit another million. That is incredibly strong considering that this is a game that is well over a year old. First of all, that shows the power of Steam and why PlayStation should release their games on PC immediately when they come out and stop waiting a year or two. Release those games on Steam right away. Can you imagine how well Stellar Blade would have sold on Steam if it had been a day one release on there? With the modding capabilities on that platform, that is definitely where people want to play. Now, of course, the reason that they don't do that, the reason that games like these are delayed releases on PC, is because PlayStation makes more money when the game is sold on their own platform, whereas Steam gets a 25 to 30% cut when it is sold on there. But still, I think that any sales they lost to Steam would have been more than made up for by the fact that their overall numbers would have been much higher had they released Stellar Blade on the PC on day one, when the hype was really high. But game journalists, as we've discussed the other day, are really not happy about this game at all. Look at PC Gamer's review of this game. This shows just how completely out of touch these jackasses are. They gave Stellar Blade a 68 out of 100. That is pretty damn low considering other journalists gave it a cumulative 81 of 100 on Metacritic with 134 reviews, and gamers gave it a 9.2 out of 10. But if you look here, you can see that the journalist who reviewed the game on PC Gamer is a chick, and I would like to use a bit of language toward her that has been directed at the majority male audience for years now. This wasn't made for you, so I don't want to hear your opinions on it. But in the wake of Stellar Blade's success, and now that the game was able to announce 1 million copies sold in 3 days for a 1-year-old game, that is certain to piss these people off more. But in the wake of the game's success, game journalist Paul Tassi has attempted to minimize this success. He wrote on X, "The Stellar Blade curve is interesting, as you can see just how Asia-focused it is. Prime gaming time in the West is pretty much its daily low point. Tweet screenshot prevention. I'm not saying this is bad. But here's the thing. Remember me talking about all those games at the beginning of this video who announced their player count instead of units sold? Where was the scrutiny for those games? Where was the scrutiny from these game journalists toward those figures that they put out? It didn't exist. They did not scrutinize them at all. This level of scrutiny here only comes out for games that succeed and go against the game journalist narrative. As Grums said in response to this post, this is always their racist fallback. Well, it was the Asians, but I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Sure, Paul, that's why you brought it up. And yeah, to be honest, the only other time I can remember seeing these game journalists scrutinize where players come from is when Black Myth Wukong came out and sold millions of copies, and they made a point, the game journalists made a point of pointing out that many of those numbers came from the Chinese, and Asmongold replied to Grums, giving me a good laugh as he wrote, "Everyone knows players from Asia count for less than Western ones, but by how much? It would make sense to have a ratio of maybe every 5 players from Asia are equal to 3 Western players. I feel like that's a pretty fair compromise." And now, in an effort to cover his own ass, Tassie recently posted this, where he talks about the numbers for Dune Awakening, and he mentions that Europe prime time is when they've peaked, as if this is something that he normally does, that he normally talks about. But I have scoured his tweets, and this is not something that he discusses regularly. It only happened with Stellar Blade. But nobody talked about Monster Hunter Wilds and how that was a huge hit in Asia. Nobody questioned where those players came from. In fact, Asia is where the bulk of the players came from in Monster Hunter Wilds. But that game doesn't go against the game journalist narrative, so they had no scrutiny for it. But tough shit for them. The sales numbers from the Asian marketplace count the same as Americans, and it would seem to me that if these developers want to make money, then it is a good idea to cater your games to this audience that bought the hell out of the likes of Stellar Blade and Black Myth Wukong, and they need to stop making shit catering to the minority of gamers who want crap like Dragon Age the Veilguard while hiding behind player count figures. But I'm gonna leave it there. Drop your mockery of these game journalists into the comment section below, and we will talk there. Thanks for watching, me hearties. If you haven't already, your Admiral is inviting you to subscribe to the channel and become a part of the crew. Life as a space pirate may not be glamorous, but there's always plenty of booty.